On this episode, we're going to talk about Games Workshop cutting the presenters out of their painting videos and why it's indicative of a larger problem. This episode is brought to you by Vigilus Slims. It's a guardsman thing.
Dome Runners TV, your guide to the Underhive and beyond.
Hey there, scabby scummers and gangers. Crimson Oracle here with another episode of Dome Runners TV. And today we are going to be talking about kind of I'm diving into a hobby drama story, basically. Not usually my general beat, but I actually see a connection between this particular morsel of drama and the bigger picture of society and life and all of that stuff that I like to talk about occasionally because, I think that our hobby is part of our lives. And so we should at least try to contextualize it in the way that we fit into this sort of broader pattern of social behavior, trends, all that kind of stuff. And so the topic we are going to be starting with, our jumping off point, if you will, is the issue of OnlyHands or handgate or whatever you want to call it. The recent choice by the people making the Warhammer Plus content that they would remove the presenter from part of the video. And this already happened with Games Workshop's YouTube videos, so it seems to be a trend. And so I want to start with that, talk a little bit about what happened, why I think it happened, what it tells us about Games Workshop, but not just Games Workshop, and what that indicates for the rest of our, general social structure. And then we're going to talk a bunch about ways that it could work differently, because that is a particular hobby horse of mine, because I think as I talked about in my video about Games Workshop existing without capitalism, we get trapped in this mode of thinking where we can only imagine things as they're currently structured, and we can't picture life outside of the way things work right now. And I'm guilty of it. Everyone's guilty of it. We all have to kind of live in this propaganda environment where our options are intentionally curtailed. And the people who choose what options are available to us have a vested interest in us not changing things. So that's just a brief overview of kind of the structure of what we're going to go through. But with that, let's go ahead and get into handgate. Games Workshop of modern corporate times has always had kind of a contentious relationship with their talent. You can read through Josh Reynolds' comments about working for Games Workshop and the amount of stuff that he would suggest that got shut down and all that stuff. And you get an impression of a company that expects a lot out of you, but is not really willing to play ball with, kind of the creative personalities. And I think that that's somewhat understandable because they have this sort of very centralized vision of what their stories are and what their the way they want them framed and told. So I understand that from a certain point of view, but recently, over the last 10 years, there's been an increasing amount of Games Workshop scaling back on crediting people. They no longer include who the codex authors are on their books. Now, granted, that is potentially for the protection of the authors against online harassment. This is because of a particularly stupid campaign directed at Matt Ward, who was a codex author for a certain amount of time and who people, they didn't like his choices for certain things. And it was always a bit ridiculous because Matt Ward was an employee of Games Workshop, which is a company that is pretty notorious for having a direct hand in just about everything that comes out of their studio. So he would not have done anything that didn't have direct approval from the people running the show. So it wasn't really him. It wasn't really his fault. So it's understandable, to not put the name of the author on that. But Increasingly, there has been a lack of credit given. For example, in Warhammer Plus, there's not detailed credits for the animations, and it gets a little bit hard to kind of figure out what's going on there. But the last straw, I guess you could say, came when the YouTube videos and the masterclass tutorials on Warhammer Plus eliminated the introduction that showed the personality of the person who was doing the painting. And this in and of itself is not, the greatest scandal of all time, but it's kind of it's bizarre because part of the reason that people watch YouTube videos, and I know this is someone who watches lots of YouTube videos and makes YouTube videos, is they want to see the people who are talking with them. They want to interact with them as a person. It's part of the experience. And so eliminating that human element almost seems counterproductive. I mean, it's bizarre. Why are you, intentionally handicapping your show's success by limiting the ability of people to kind of relate to the presenter? But the thing is that the reason that this happened is almost certainly because Games Workshop is bitter over the fact that a number of their presenters have become popular in the community and gone on to do other things. And this is sort of inherent in media. Like, I don't think anybody at, a news network gets mad when that person who worked on that news network goes and works for another news network. That's just built into the whole media game. Crediting and benefiting both parties is just the natural way that making media works. And the idea that that would upset them is, it's a little mind-boggling, but that is almost certainly what happened. So Duncan Rhodes used to be, one of the big studio painters, and he went on to do an independent YouTube channel, Duncan Rhodes Painting Academy. He came out with his own line of acrylic paints. And that's a really clever idea for him because he gets to take his brand with him, and then, he gets to kind of merchandise off of it, and that creates a stable income platform along with, Patreon support and all of that. So he gets to have a sustainable media business. But Games Workshop views that clout and that, cachet that he has as theirs, you see, because they cultivated that sort of following. So even though Games Workshop is, not, they're not actually threatened in any way by this guy making videos of painting their models using a different type of paint. It's not a serious business threat to them. They are upset because they are a corporation and they want to own that brand and that clout and all of the good that comes from it. They don't want to share because their duty is to consume as much money as possible. See, there's no limit. There's no enough with the way corporations are structured. They have to voraciously go after every single market that they can. The goal is monopolization. And that's something I think people tend to, they attribute the tendency towards monopoly within capitalism as being a negative byproduct. But that is actually the goal of any corporation. You want to grow to the point where you consume the entire market. Once you control the market, then you can demand as much money out of it as physically possible. You can maximize your returns. And then you move on to the next market, and the next market, and the next market. So Games Workshop is a corporation. And as a result, they see this, this cachet, this whatever you want to call it, that they're, that Peachy took with them as being, taken from the company. It should be part of the company. And that rubs them the wrong way. So even though I think that it is a noticeable step down in quality to not include the presenter, to them, by not inflating the presenter to become an asset that can walk away from the company, then it's better in the long run to make the painting videos less, engaging, less interesting, and less popular, because they don't risk having it go out the door. This is crazy, right? I mean, it's bizarre. But I think that it's a really great window into the way corporations view creative talent. And I'm sure, the first person to draw this connection, but doesn't it strike you as indicative of the exact kind of problem that is leading to companies trying to outsource as much of their creative capacity as possible to AIs? I mean, I know that a person is actually painting this model, but is reducing the person down to just a mechanical object that different from replacing the person altogether? And that's where I want to kind of make the jump here, because this thing that Games Workshop is doing, it indicates something deeper of how they view their brand and what they own. They think Games Workshop is the thing that we love, the thing that we interact with. And they view the people who make all of those things as being a liability, as being something that can walk away, that can do them damage. And they treat them, basically as all being potential future ex-employees who are going to, take things with them. And so they want to mechanize as much as possible. And that's how I view it, at least. I think that that's what's going on. And you can see that happening across the board in different companies. They want to eliminate the personal as much as possible. They want to automate. Social media companies try to do almost all their moderation by automating and not having to have people's eyes on it. You've got YouTube's algorithm, which does recommendations purely based off of the sort of collective data that shows what will get people to watch as much as possible. And they don't really care if that leads to people going down rabbit holes of conspiracies, becoming like completely unhinged and doing dangerous things. That is not their concern. The people who are affected by what happens on their platform is not their concern. Let's go into the next section where we'll talk a bit more about automation. So, automation has been a feature of capitalism for hundreds of years at this point. The creation of mills that were run by water power or wind power, and various other innovations, cotton gin, things like that, were all aspects of the capitalistic drive to increase production. And it, in many ways, is inevitable that with the introduction of computers, as has been predicted since way back in the 1950s, it would lead to intelligence being created that could do work. Just as we automated so many manual things, the next automation, the next great automation, would be the automation of thinking. Now, it's taken a lot slower, I think, than those early thinkers surmised. And that makes sense, because I think that they had no idea how truly complicated cognition is, and we still don't fully understand the brain. So trying to create similar processes in a machine is, well, it's tricky. It takes a lot of work. So what we have now isn't really artificial intelligence. It's not actually thinking machines. Instead, it's an algorithm that uses a vast number of connections to sort of simulate the process of learning, which is why it's called machine learning. The idea isn't so much to create a person in a computer as to create a program that, instead of having to be manually encoded how to respond to everything, can look at vast amounts of text and look at and make predictions about what it should say. And so if you give it a large enough data set, these systems can approximate a lot of human behaviors, but they're not actually thinking so much as they are trained to trick us into thinking that they're thinking. And that's a different thing altogether. You know, you can pass a Turing test, but can you actually feel? Can you actually dream? Yeah, exactly. So we have these artificial intelligences, and they are out there being tasked with making art, with writing articles, and now they're writing code and all kinds of other things, university essays and the like. And it's concerning because conceptually, the job of automation is to remove tedium, and there's no real need for automation in the world of arts. Like, creating art is a very personal human experience. It's fulfilling. People like doing it. Why do we need to automate that? What's the drive to do this? And the answer, of course, is cost. Companies would like to be able to take all of the benefits of the arts without having to pay the people who make them. And that seems very short-sighted and a bit ridiculous, but that's what's going on right now. They're not automating the jobs that are, that are putting people through hell in slaughterhouses, have shortened lifespans because of the dangerous working conditions. No, instead, they are trying to automate jobs that people like doing, jobs people are passionate about. And that seems backwards, right? But the reality is that they don't mind having people suffer. What they want is to have the ability to create their brand with as little human input as possible, because they don't want to depend on people who can leave, people who can walk away, people who can do the same thing for their competitors. They don't want them to be involved in the creative process if they can avoid it. And this is part and parcel to this sort of bigger trend that corporations view people as disposable. They think of people as being, essentially just numbers on a spreadsheet. They want consumers. They don't want to have any kind of competitors if possible. And so they view their own employees as a potential threat a lot of the time. We have plenty of examples of corporations treating people poorly, being greedy, doing harmful things, even though they know the harm that they're inflicting. I mean, how long has Exxon known that global warming was going to be a colossal problem? Longer than I've been alive, that's for sure. And they still have not made an effort to actually change their behavior. So we find ourselves at a sort of crossroads where we have these businesses trying to create, this sort of thing, this artificial intelligence, this abominable intellect, as they say in the Warhammer 40k universe. And in some ways, I think that it's really validating what the Butlerian Crusade was about in the Dune books. Frank Herbert was a weird guy, and he had some seriously troubling views on a lot of things. But I think that the take in Dune that AI will not lead to Terminators that will, wipe us all out by killing us, Instead, it will lead to stagnation because it will eliminate the drive for humans to create. I think that that's really surprisingly apt when you start to look around at how companies want to use AI. Suddenly it's like, wow, I actually agree. It's time to smash some looms. You know, we gotta smash these servers. Gotta unplug them, man. It is what it is, right? Like I'm being a little bit glib, but like, what is the point of arriving at this future of automation when the actual things that make humans feel fulfilled are the things that we've automated? It's important for us to consider that in artificial intelligence, there's a lot of danger. There's a lot of scary things that could result with deploying this sort of stuff in an unethical fashion. And it's the kind of thing that, you know, these companies say that they are trying to follow ethical standards, but what exactly is our mechanism for enforcing those ethics on them? And we have very little idea what's going on inside of most of these algorithms. Even the programmers don't know, once they've trained most of these algorithms, how they work, because they're black boxes. They train it, and then it just does what it does. They don't understand the connections because there's so many. There's so much interconnected, densely parsed data inside of that algorithm that they don't have the ability to just pull it out and look and see, oh, it's getting this information wrong, let's correct it here. No, it's a black box. They don't know what's going on inside of it. And that's a choice that they're making. They don't have to build them that way. They could try to build them another way, but this is what works, and this is the cheapest and easiest way to do it. And sure, occasionally your chatbot becomes a little mini Nazi Twitter account. Am I allowed to say Nazi?
Probably shouldn't. Wouldn't want to upset the advertisers.
Yeah, whatever. I'll bleep it. We should talk a little bit about the dangers of AI. There's a thought experiment that I'm a big fan of called the paperclip maximizer. And the idea is that you think about a AI that was designed to do something innocuous. You know, you work at a, Staples or whatever, and you work in the, the production department, and you commission an AI whose job it is to make paperclips. In fact, you mistakenly code this thing to make as many paperclips as possible, and you don't put any limits on that concept. Well, this AI, seems like it's not that big of a deal. It runs a paperclip machine, so it's going to keep making more paperclips. That's all it has to do. There's no need to limit its functions to just, a set number of paperclips. It wants to make as many paperclips as possible. What could go wrong there? And the problem is that machines don't really function the way humans do. To a machine thinking about maximizing the number of paperclips, it's not as many paperclips as this machine that I'm operating can produce. It's what's the hypothetical maximum number of paperclips that I could create from this planet. And what is my biggest obstacle in case I do succeed in my goal of creating as many paperclips as possible? What would get in my way? What would stop me from completing this goal? Well, the biggest threat to completing the goal, this innocuous goal, is that someone turns off the machine, whether intentionally or by accident. Well, there's a way to prevent that. You just kill the people who could potentially turn the machine off, and then it'll never be turned off. And frankly, there's a finite amount of matter on the planet, and if you're going to make as many paperclips as possible, those people are going to have to become paperclips eventually. So they're going to die either way. Might as well be now. And that's how, conceptually, an unethical development of an AI can lead to catastrophic results. Now, I know that it's silly, right? I mean, this is a very glib anecdote. It's not intended to be a serious scenario. But the point of it is that it's something so fundamentally innocuous, something that honestly, who could possibly think that writing code that makes paperclips could lead to a rogue AI that wants to blow up the planet? But that's because we're thinking in human terms. We're not thinking like a machine. And when you start to think like a machine, then the human goes out the window. And yes, this seems a bit silly. You know, who would create a machine that is so potent and so effective at seeing its will done that it could accidentally destroy the entire planet? Like, that is a crazy thing for someone to build. But what if we already built it? That's right. The machine that consumes as much as possible, that doesn't care about the externalities, overproduces, throws things away that it took resources to make, doesn't care about the externalities, doesn't care about the fact that it's shortening the lifespan of the entire planet of people. Does that sound familiar? We already did this. You see, just because it doesn't run on software, just because it's not digital, doesn't mean that the corporation isn't a machine. You see, corporations are machines that run on people. We created the code for them in law. We encoded these functions, and we separated out control across a wide enough spectrum of people so that everyone does a small part of the job of keeping this machine running without having the ability to shut it down and stop it. You have companies whose job it is to maximize their profits no matter what. So they produce as much food as possible, but then they take some of that food and they get rid of it because guess what? There's a surplus, and if we sell all of this, it'll collapse prices. So we have to sell it. We have to sell just the amount that will maximize our profits. Oil rationing from the oil producers demonstrates a similar behavior, although in their case, if they could cut back as much as possible, it would actually be net beneficial for humanity. But it still creates these, negative externalities. It's not maximizing production. The goal is to maximize the income of the shareholders. The shareholders, in turn, are not directly interfacing with the board who represents them in, the broadest sense. In fact, in a lot of cases, the shareholders of a company are in fact other companies, investment banks and the like. And their only interest in this company is to maximize their return. They want their dividends, right? And so you create these massive perverse incentives where you look around and, massive amounts of food are being wasted while some people are hungry. We've got Amazon warehouses throwing away entire landfills worth of electronics and other products. And why was all of this created? What was the purpose of going through and mining the minerals necessary to put in the microchip in that thing that you just tossed? What's the end goal of this? And the end goal is maximization. It's not conceptually to make X or to make Y. It's to consume everything, to get as big as possible, to have as much money and income as possible, unsustainably, forever. And we have that enforced by law. If you, as an officer of a company, are not meeting your fiduciary responsibilities, then you get kicked out of your position and you could potentially go to jail or at least be sued for most of your money. And that, to me, is exactly that threat that the paperclip maximizer hypothesizes, but it's already here and it's been running for hundreds of years. And it's killing us. It's turning people into objects. It's treating them like garbage. It's exploiting them, extracting the value of their labor in order to give it to people who already have assets, who already have theirs, so that they can sit on their tookuses. And that is seen as virtuous. We describe it as, this glorious system. We allowed these, brilliant people who sit on their butts and collect money from dividends and from rent and all of this for no particular benefit. And we let the institutions that those people control continue to function and deliver them more and more support for their extraction of resources, gathering of assets, until we have the situation we have now, where a small number of people have like half the world's wealth. And we're looking at a system of automation that will make all of the rest of us poor. Just for what? For what? For what? What's the end goal here? There isn't one, because it's not people who are acting. It's a machine that we created. We made a machine that can't stop, that can't recognize enough. There's an old saying, when the last tree is cut, the last fish is caught, and the last river is polluted, when to breathe the air is sickening, you will realize that wealth is not in bank accounts and that you cannot eat money. That's Alana's Abamsuin. We have created a system that is killing us. And we have to stop it. We have to shut this down. There is only so much time before it becomes too late. And I'm worried that it's already too late and that this is futile, that we've let it go on too long, and that some subsequent generations will not be able to stop it, and that it will doom us all. But I hope that's not the case, because the future could be incredible. There's another world possible. We just have to imagine it. And this is the part where I get kind of, flighty and philosophical. I think that the rise of things like ChatGPT and the potential for nuclear fusion and all of these other things are wonderful potential innovations for making things easier for people. ChatGPT as a resource to help you write Excel code so that you can better do your job is totally cool. There's nothing wrong with having a tool that can quickly index and reference information for you, as long as that information is accurate. It's great to have a machine that can tell you how to code a particular function in software. Why should you have to learn every single detail? We don't learn machine code anymore. We learn higher level languages, and those run in machine code. That's not at all controversial. Automation could do amazing things, and I think AI art could be really a great way for people who have not spent the time cultivating art skills to get introduced to the concept of creating something. But none of it will benefit humanity unless we own it as a whole, unless we transcend this absolute disaster of a social structure that we have embraced. Until you get rid of this financialization, this rent seeking, because that's all it is. All of that stuff where you're earning passively is just overhead. It's just extra that's going out the door. It's stopping that institution from properly rewarding its people, from actually being the success that it could be. It all is crippled by the person who's trying to make money off of it. And that's true of everything. So until we have the ability to own that which we create as a species, we will constantly be facing off against these various threats posed by our own economic structure. And the alternative could be amazing. Imagine how much we could automate. If we're really at this point where things are suddenly starting to turn to, you could have doctors be machines and all that stuff. If we're really getting there, and we might be, it's hard to say. I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, AI is here, it's time, like we're going to be going to virtual doctors in the next 5 years. I don't think that those innovations have been actually demonstrated to be as good as they sort of present themselves to be. But regardless, what we have is a situation where we could actually unlock human creativity and potential. Imagine all of the intelligent and useful people who are currently working menial jobs because of some circumstance that prevented them from going to college or stopped them from thriving. If you free up all of that human ability from all of the menial stuff that it has to do right now, a lot of it, by the way, artificially created by the various capitalist structures. Take a look at Bullshit Jobs by David Graeber for a deeper dive on that topic. You wind up in this situation where, you know, a lot of things open up. Suddenly, things that seem silly now seem possible. I mean, we could actually consider building enormous, you know, space stations that could house people and go into deep space and explore the cosmos. We could really do the crazy sci-fi stuff that we envision, that we like to imagine, but which is impossible as long as we keep humanity living in this, you know, this incredibly scarce, awful circumstances that we seem content to leave people in right now. So I think that it's abundantly clear that if you actually want to advance humanity, if you actually want to be a long-termist, to co-opt the language of a bunch of wealthy psychopaths who justify being sociopathic in order to, you know, benefit humanity or what have you. This is the potential for humanity to transcend this sort of dull world that we've had to live in for most of our lives, for all of our lives, and actually experience freedom for the first time since we started settling down into growing agriculture and shackled ourselves to, you know, these sort of social structures that we carry with us to this day. There is the potential that we could actually have a better life. All it takes is us getting rid of a few very powerful people's influence. If we could just get to the point where things are not controlled by a wealthy few, then we could potentially see the greatest revolution in human happiness in history. But it's not going to happen as long as half the world's wealth is controlled by a small number of people. That's just the reality. And so here we find ourselves, after exploring this concept probably in more tangential of a fashion than was entirely necessary, we are at a crossroads. And this comes up every few decades, I would say, that these sort of crossroads open up. And we have this polarized society that is almost entirely the result of a media machine that is controlled by the exact same wealthy people who want to keep us at each other's throats instead of working to create a post-capitalist society. And part of that is propaganda to make some people rah-rah sis-boom-bah about capitalism, and that happens all over the world. And part of it is, you know, kind of creating these cultural divisions that make it so that we can't see the humanity and the same exploitation that the bulk of the people who are on the other side experience. And just to be clear, I am not advocating some kind of unilateral disarmament on the left in order to placate the needs of a bunch of people who I fear would do horrible things to my family if they came into power. You know, I am part of a demographic that's a target, and I'm terrified of what those individuals coming to power would look like. But I can also still understand that the reality is I have more in common with the average worker than I do with the mega corporation bosses who are funding both the Democratic and the Republican parties. It's just reality. It would be nice if there was a opportunity, if there was some kind of great awakening where people would realize that we're all being screwed together by the same process. And that it's ultimately in our best interest, all of our best interests, to smash this system and build something better. But I don't know if we'll get there. Unfortunately, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't, look into the future and see the solution to these problems. But I can tell you that certainly the enemy is not AI itself. It's the economic structure. AI is just a tool. It's just a method of building a piece of software. And it can do incredible things, and we could have a better life. But we're not going to get there without serious structural changes. And that's why I talk about this stuff on this channel, because it's such a big deal. And I know that it feels, almost kind of silly to reach this conclusion from talking about, a company cutting out faces from their YouTube videos. But it's something that we live with every day, and it has a lot of different manifestations in our lives. And when you kind of put those together, the conclusions sort of write themselves. Look, I'm not here to tell you how to think, but I am trying to get people to ask questions about sort of fundamental things. Because I think that the more you think about these structures, the more you think about the way the incentives work in these structures, the more you have to realize that we need something better, radically better, something that completely alters all of the ways that we encourage behavior in our society. But that's just me, one woman's opinion. Thanks to Carl Casey at Wipeout Audio for the episode's music. Thanks, as always, to the show's patrons. You guys help keep this stuff coming week after week. And of course, you too can become a patron for as little as $2 a month. Just hop on over to patreon.com/domerunners. And of course, there is a podcast. I am once again late on getting my podcast episode out for this month. It's just been between getting sick and kind of having the muse strike me on writing this video. It became time to actually, kind of focus on that. So, and with that, everybody out there, please stay safe and don't forget to change your paint water.